The phone slipped from my trembling fingers, clattering onto my mahogany desk. 3 messages. That's all it took to shatter 28 years of marriage into jagged pieces that now cut through my chest with every breath. I'm Rachel, and until 5 minutes ago, I thought I knew exactly who I was. Director of Administration at Innovatech, devoted wife to the CEO, master of keeping everything running smoothly. Funny how a few carelessly forgotten text messages can strip away every certainty you've built your life around. Looking forward to our private meeting later. Last night was incredible. You make me feel so alive, Mark. The texts from Jessica glowed on my husband's phone screen like toxic neon signs. He'd left it on my desk while rushing to a board meeting, asking me to forward some contracts to David. Instead, I found this. Rachel? Karen appeared in my doorway, her usually composed face creased with concern. The quarterly reports are ready for your review, and Mark's asking about those contracts. I forced my features into what I hoped was a neutral expression. Tell him I'll send them shortly. My voice sounded strange, distant, like it belonged to someone else. Are you feeling all right? You look... I'm fine. The words came out sharper than intended. Karen hesitated, then nodded and retreated, closing the door behind her. Through my office window, I could see Jessica's desk and the open workspace below. 28 years old, all sleek confidence and calculated charm. Now I understood why Mark had insisted on hiring her as executive assistant despite her lack of experience. Why he'd been working such late hours. Why he'd started wearing that new cologne. My computer pinged with an incoming email from Mark. Where are those contracts? David's waiting. I reached for my water bottle, but my hand shook so badly I knocked it over instead. Water spread across my desk, seeping into important documents. I didn't move to clean it up. Another ping, this time from Jessica. Hi, Rachel. Just wondering if we're still on for lunch tomorrow to discuss the Henderson project? The smiley face mocked me. How many lunches had we shared while she was sleeping with my husband? How many times had she smiled at me knowing? My office phone rang. David's extension. Rachel? Mark's getting antsy about those contracts. David, my voice cracked. I need to see you. Privately, it's important. A pause. Give me 5 minutes. Meet me in the 3rd floor conference room. I grabbed Mark's phone and stood up, my legs unsteady. The walk to the conference room felt like moving through molasses. Each person I passed was a potential witness to my unraveling. David was already there when I arrived, his familiar presence somehow making everything more real. I handed him the phone wordlessly, watching as he read the messages. His face darkened. He stopped himself, looking at me with a mixture of anger and pity. How long have you known? About 5 minutes. I laughed, but it sounded more like a sob. Long enough to realize every dinner he missed, every late meeting, every business trip? Rachel, I'm so sorry. I had no idea. Neither did I. I moved to the window, watching the city below continue its normal rhythm while my world imploded. What I can't figure out is whether I was truly blind or if I just didn't want to see it. David stepped closer, his reflection appearing beside mine in the glass. What are you going to do? I studied our reflections. David's concerned face, my own hollow expression. In that moment, something shifted inside me. The initial shock was crystallizing into something harder, colder. I'm going to do what I do best, David. I'm going to organize things. I turned to face him, starting with the systematic dismantling of everything Mark and Jessica hold dear. David's eyebrows shot up. That doesn't sound like you. No, I agreed, my voice steady for the first time since finding the messages. I suppose it doesn't, but then again, I'm not sure who I am anymore. Maybe it's time to find out. I used to love watching Mark get ready for work each morning. Today, studying his reflection in our bedroom mirror as he adjusted his tie, I wondered how many of those morning routines had been lies. The Henderson contract needs your signature, he said, not meeting my eyes in the mirror. Jessica prepared an excellent summary. Of course she did. I gripped my coffee mug tighter. I'll review it personally before signing anything. He turned, frowning. Don't you trust my judgment? The irony almost made me laugh. Instead, I took another sip of coffee, letting the bitter taste ground me. Trust but verify. Isn't that what you always say? His phone buzzed. He checked it quickly, his expression shifting for just a fraction of a second. Anyone else might have missed it, but I'd spent 28 years reading his face. Board meeting, he muttered, heading for the door. Don't wait up tonight. Another late one? I kept my voice carefully neutral. Crucial negotiations. He paused at the doorway. You understand? I did understand. Far too well now. At the office, I found Emily waiting by my desk with 2 cups of coffee. One look at my face, and she closed my office door. Spill it, she said, settling into the chair across from me. You've got that look. What look? The one you had right before you fired that embezzling accountant last year. Like you're plotting someone's murder, but in a very organized way. I almost told her everything, but Emily had known Mark almost as long as I had. The truth would hurt her too, and I wasn't ready to share that burden. Just reviewing the Henderson contract, I said instead. Something feels off. Speaking of off, Emily leaned forward. Did you see Jessica's presentation yesterday? The one about restructuring the admin department? My stomach clenched. No, I wasn't invited. That's what felt weird. It was your department, but she ran the whole thing. Mark seemed impressed. Emily studied my face. Rachel, is everything okay between you and Mark? Before I could answer, David appeared in my doorway. Sorry to interrupt, but Rachel, we need to discuss those contract revisions. Emily took the hint and left. David closed the door behind her. Jessica's making moves, he said without preamble. She's proposed restructuring the entire administrative hierarchy. Under her plan, your position would be redistributed. The coffee turned to acid in my stomach. Mark approved this? He's reviewing it. Rachel, she's systematically undermining your authority while positioning herself as indispensable. And Mark... David hesitated. He's not exactly discouraging her. I opened my laptop, pulling up the Henderson contract. Show me everything. For the next hour, David walked me through Jessica's carefully constructed power play. Every proposal, every meeting, every casual suggestion to Mark, all designed to slowly edge me out of my own department. The question is, David said finally, what are you going to do about it? I stared at the contract on my screen, remembering the day Mark and I started this company in our garage. How we'd stayed up late, planning, dreaming, building something together. Now he was planning my professional execution with his mistress. First, I said, I'm going to find out exactly what's in this Henderson contract that Jessica's so eager for me to sign. David raised an eyebrow. And then? Then I'm going to remind everyone exactly why I've been running this department for 20 years. I met his gaze, starting with the quarterly review meeting tomorrow. Jessica's presenting the new restructuring plan there. Is she? I allowed myself a small smile. We'll see about that. Later that evening, I was still at my desk when I heard voices from Mark's office. Through the glass walls, I watched Jessica perch on his desk, laughing at something he'd said. His hand brushed her knee as he reached for some papers. 28 years ago, he'd touched my knee the same way, in our first office together. I'd thought it was forever then. Now I watched him repeat the gesture with Jessica and felt something inside me harden into resolve. Karen, I called softly. His assistant looked up from her desk. Please schedule me first for tomorrow's quarterly review. There are some things the board needs to hear. Karen nodded, her eyes flickering between me and the scene in Mark's office. I wondered how long she'd known, how many others had seen what I'd been blind to. Tomorrow, they'd all see something very different. The quarterly review meeting started exactly as Jessica planned, except she wasn't the one standing at the podium. The boardroom fell silent as I clicked through my presentation, methodically dismantling every one of her proposed changes to my department. As you can see, I said, highlighting the financial projections, this restructuring would cost us nearly $2 million in the first year alone. I paused, letting that sink in. And that's before we factor in the loss of institutional knowledge. Mark shifted in his chair, his jaw tightening. Jessica's perfectly manicured nails drummed against the conference table. Neither had expected this. These numbers, Mark interrupted, they seem rather pessimistic. They're actually conservative. David's voice carried from the other end of the table. I've verified Rachel's calculations myself. I clicked to the next slide. But the real concern isn't just financial. Let's look at the Henderson contract. Jessica's fingers stopped drumming. The proposed changes would have given complete oversight of our largest account to a single junior executive. I met Jessica's eyes across the table. An executive with less than 6 months of experience in our industry. The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Board members started whispering among themselves. "That's a mischaracterization," Jessica said, her voice sharp. "The proposal clearly states that you would have sole signing authority on all Henderson decisions." I pulled up the contract language, including budget allocations, staffing, and project management. Interesting, considering you've never managed a portfolio of this size. Mark approved the proposal. She shot back. Did he? I turned to the board. Did any of you actually see the full contract? Or just the executive summary Jessica prepared? More whispers. Mark's face had gone from tight to thunderous. "Rachel," he warned, "this isn't the appropriate forum." It's exactly the forum. I pulled up another document. Because while reviewing the contract, I discovered something else. Someone has been systematically altering project reports for the past 3 months. Changing numbers, shifting resources, small amounts easily missed. Unless you know where to look. Jessica's face went pale. That's a serious accusation. It is. I clicked again, showing a trail of digital breadcrumbs. Every altered document traces back to one user ID. Would you like to explain that, Jessica? The room erupted. Board members demanded explanations. Mark tried to call for order. Through it all, Jessica stared at me with naked hatred. "This is a witch hunt," she declared, standing. "Rachel's obviously feeling threatened by changes to her outdated system, and we all know why she's really doing this." "Jessica," Mark snapped, but she was already pulling out her phone. "Should we discuss the real reason you're so desperate to discredit me, Rachel? Should we show everyone the texts, the photos?" My heart stopped. "What photos?" But Jessica's triumphant smile faltered as she scrolled through her phone. Her face changed from confidence to confusion to panic. "They're gone," she whispered. "Everything's gone." "Cybersecurity audit," David explained calmly. "Standard procedure when we discover unauthorized system access. All personal devices connected to company accounts were automatically wiped. Policy, you understand." Jessica's phone clattered to the table. She looked at Mark, but he was staring at the financial projections on the screen, his face ashen. "The board needs time to review these findings," the chairman announced. "We'll reconvene tomorrow morning. Jessica, please remain available. We'll have questions." People filed out, leaving me alone with Mark and Jessica. The silence stretched like a rubber band about to snap. "You've ruined everything," Jessica hissed. "No," I replied quietly. "You did that yourself. I just showed everyone where to look." Mark finally spoke. "Rachel, save it." I gathered my papers. "By the way, I'm staying at Emily's tonight. Don't wait up." I walked out with my head high, but my hands were shaking. In my office, I found David waiting. "That was quite a show," he said. "Are you okay?" I sank into my chair. "She had photos, David. What photos? Does it matter now?" "I suppose not." I looked through my office window at the chaos unfolding in the executive suite. Jessica was crying, Mark was shouting, and board members were huddled in corners making urgent phone calls. "What happens next?" David asked. I thought about the other documents I'd discovered, the ones I hadn't shown yet, the ones that would finish what today had started. "Next," I said, "we make sure neither of them can hurt anyone else." Emily's guest room felt like a prison cell, despite the fresh flowers and carefully arranged toiletries. I'd been staring at the ceiling for hours when my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "We should talk. Coffee at Riverside Park?" Lucas, Jessica's friend. I'd seen him around the office, always hovering at the edges of conversations. What game was she playing now? I met him by the river an hour later. He looked nervous, clutching a manila envelope like a shield. "Jessica doesn't know I'm here," he said before I could speak. "But there are things you should see." The envelope contained photos, dozens of them. Mark and Jessica at restaurants, hotels, private moments that turned my stomach. But mixed among them were others. See, seal. Surveillance photos of me. At the grocery store, getting coffee. Outside Emily's house last night. She's been having me follow you, Lucas admitted, his voice barely audible over the river's flow. Said it was for a surprise party. I believed her until yesterday's board meeting. My hands trembled as I flipped through the photos. Why are you showing me this? Because last night she asked me to doctor some of them. He wouldn't meet my eyes. Make it look like you were meeting someone. Having your own affair. A jogger passed us, her footsteps echoing on the path. I waited until she was gone before speaking. And did you? No? He shifted uncomfortably. But she'll find someone who will. Rachel, she's not who I thought she was. The things I've heard her say about you, about the company. My phone buzzed again. David. Emergency board meeting called for tomorrow morning. Mark's making moves. Lucas glanced at my phone. There's more. The Henderson contract? The real version is completely different from what she showed the board. She has offshore accounts, shell companies. Stop. I held up my hand. Don't tell me anything else. Not here. He nodded, understanding. I saved everything. Documents, recordings, the original photos. It's all on this. He slipped a USB drive across the bench. Just be careful. She's got people everywhere. Back at Emily's, I found Karen waiting in the driveway. You shouldn't be here, I said. Neither should you. She handed me a stack of papers. Mark's filing for divorce, citing abandonment and professional sabotage. He's trying to force an emergency vote to remove you from the board. My legs felt weak. He can't do that. He's CEO. He's claiming you're emotionally unstable, that yesterday's presentation was a vindictive attack. She hesitated. Jessica's backing his story. They're painting you as a jealous wife trying to destroy the company. I thought of the photos Lucas had shown me, the USB drive burning a hole in my pocket. When did we become expendable, Karen? When did loyalty stop mattering? Maybe when the Henderson deal got too big to ignore. She straightened her jacket. The board meets at 9 tomorrow. Whatever you're planning, do it before then. After she left, I called David. How bad is it? Bad, he said. Mark's gathered enough votes. If you show up tomorrow, you'll be removed and possibly face criminal charges for corporate espionage. I laughed, the sound harsh in Emily's quiet house. Espionage against my own company? Rachel. David's voice softened. Maybe it's time to walk away. Take the settlement they'll offer. Start fresh. I looked at my reflection in Emily's hallway mirror. The woman staring back wasn't the same one who'd discovered those text messages just days ago. She was harder now. Dangerous. Did you know? I said quietly. That when we started Innovatech, I was the one who secured our first major contract? Mark was too nervous to make the pitch. I closed the deal that built this company. I remember. Then you know I can't walk away. I pulled out the USB drive. Meet me at the office in an hour. Bring your laptop and that bottle of scotch you keep in your desk. Rachel, they want to paint me as the vindictive wife? Fine. Let's show them what vengeance really looks like. I hung up and dialed another number. Emily, I need a favor. Remember that reporter who covered your divorce? The one who specializes in corporate scandals? See if she's free for breakfast tomorrow. Tell her I have a story she might find interesting. The game had changed. They weren't just trying to push me aside anymore. They were trying to destroy me. But they'd forgotten one crucial detail. I had nothing left to lose. The USB drive's contents spilled across David's computer screen like toxic waste. Offshore accounts, forged signatures, a complex web of shell companies all leading back to the Henderson contract. Jessica's been busy, David muttered, scrolling through documents. But she couldn't have done this alone. She didn't. I pointed to a recurring signature. Mark's fingerprints are all over this. The question is, did he orchestrate it, or is she playing him too? Dawn crept through the office windows as we pieced together the scheme. The Henderson contract wasn't just about restructuring my department. It was about creating a shadow company that would siphon millions from Innovatech. David's phone buzzed. Board meeting's been moved up. 8 a.m. They're not waiting. I checked my watch. Where's Emily with that reporter? Rachel. David closed his laptop. Once we do this, there's no going back. Not for any of us. The elevator dinged. Through the glass walls, I watched Jessica stride into the office, earlier than usual. She caught my eye and smiled, all predatory confidence. My phone lit up with a text from Lucas. She knows I talked to you. Be careful. David, I said quietly, get these files to your secure server, now. Jessica appeared in the doorway. Early meeting? Just catching up on work. I kept my voice neutral. Shouldn't you be preparing for the board? Oh, I'm prepared. She leaned against the doorframe. You know, I actually admired you once. The loyal wife, the dedicated administrator, but you never understood what real ambition looks like. Is that what you call fraud? Her smile didn't waver. Interesting theory. Shame you won't get to share it with the board. She pulled out her phone. Mark just called an emergency security meeting. Apparently, someone's been accessing confidential files without authorization. They're locking down the system in 5 minutes. David's fingers flew across his keyboard. Jessica watched him with cold amusement. It's fascinating, really, she continued. How quickly people turn on each other when everything they've built is threatened. Mark told me how you used to practice your pitch in the mirror before your first big contract. How your hands would shake until he held them steady. My chest tightened. That private moment twisted into a weapon. Transfer complete, David announced. Jessica's phone buzzed. Her smile faltered slightly as she read the message. Excuse me, she said, turning sharply and walking away. She's scared, David observed. Good. I pulled out my own phone, dialing Emily. Where's that reporter? In position. But Rachel, there's something else. Karen just called. Mark's not just filing for divorce. He's pressing criminal charges. Corporate espionage, theft of intellectual property. The room tilted slightly. When? Papers are being served this morning, right after the board meeting. I ended the call, my mind racing. Through the glass, I watched Jessica talking intensely with Mark by the elevators. Other board members were arriving, their faces grim. David, I said, remember when we started Innovatech? That first year in the garage? Of course. You told me then that sometimes the best defense is a scorched earth offense. I met his eyes. Did you mean it? He studied me for a long moment. What do you need? 5 minutes alone in Mark's office. And your word that whatever happens next, you'll protect the company. Rachel. Your word, David. He nodded slowly. 5 minutes. I'll keep them distracted. I walked to Mark's office, past curious eyes and whispered conversations. The familiar space felt foreign now, tainted by memories of Jessica perched on his desk, of countless lies told within these walls. My hands didn't shake as I accessed his computer. 28 years of marriage meant I knew all his passwords, all his habits, including where he kept his private files. What I found confirmed everything, and revealed something worse. The elevator dinged again. Emily emerged with a sharp-suited woman I recognized from her byline photos. The reporter who'd exposed 3 major corporate scandals last year. My phone buzzed one final time, Lucas. Jessica's deleted everything. All the evidence is gone. I smiled, thinking of the files safely transferred to David's server, of the documents I'd just discovered on Mark's computer, of the story about to break. Not everything, I whispered and pressed send. The boardroom felt like a courtroom, with Mark at the head of the table playing both judge and executioner. The reporter's presence in the lobby downstairs was my only insurance policy, and even that felt fragile now. Before we begin, Mark announced, I want to address the elephant in the room. Rachel's recent behavior has become increasingly erratic and destructive. Jessica sat at his right hand, perfectly composed. The flash drive with her deleted evidence sat in my pocket like a burning coal. These allegations of financial misconduct are not only false, Mark continued, but they represent a disturbing pattern of personal vendettas threatening this company's stability. Interesting choice of words, I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. Should we discuss stability, or perhaps we should talk about the Henderson contract first? Mark's jaw tightened. Rachel, this isn't the time. It's exactly the time. I pulled out my tablet, connecting it to the display screen. Everyone here has seen Jessica's version of the contract. Now let's see the real one. The screen remained black. I tapped the tablet again. Nothing. Jessica's smile widened slightly. Technical difficulties? She asked sweetly. My phone buzzed. David. Systems locked down. Can't access servers. Mark cleared his throat. While Rachel sorts out her presentation, I have some documents to share. He gestured to his assistant, who began distributing folders. These detail a pattern of unauthorized access to confidential files, manipulation of company data, and what our legal team considers corporate espionage. The board members opened their folders. I caught glimpses of carefully selected emails, meeting notes, surveillance photos, all twisted to paint me as unstable, vindictive, dangerous. Additionally, Mark continued, given Rachel's emotional state and her attempts to sabotage key company relationships, we've been forced to take legal action. A security guard appeared in the doorway. Through the glass walls, I could see others positioning themselves throughout the office. This is a temporary restraining order, Mark said, sliding a document across the table. You're to leave the premises immediately and cease all contact with Innovatech employees. The room started spinning slightly. We can and we have. Jessica's voice dripped with false sympathy. It's for your own good, Rachel. You need help. I looked at David, but he was staring at his folder, face ashen. Whatever evidence they'd manufactured must have implicated him too. If you'll excuse us, Mark said to the board, security will escort Rachel out. We can continue our meeting afterward to discuss the company's future direction. The guard stepped forward. Through the glass, I saw Emily being stopped in the lobby, the reporter ushered out by security. Wait. My voice sounded distant, even to myself. Don't you want to know what I found in your private server, Mark? He froze. Jessica's smile slipped. The encrypted folder? I continued. The one with all the original documents showing how you and Jessica planned this? How you've been embezzling funds for months. She's delusional, Jessica snapped. This is exactly what we're talking about. I pulled out my phone, holding it up. Interesting theory. Should we call the SEC and ask them? Because I sent them everything an hour ago. Mark's face went white. You're bluffing. Am I? Check your accounts, Mark. The ones in the Caymans, they're being frozen as we speak. Jessica grabbed her laptop, fingers flying across the keyboard. After a moment, she looked up at Mark, real fear in her eyes for the first time. You little bitch, she whispered. Rachel. Mark's voice had lost its authority, turning pleading. Whatever you think you found. Board members, I interrupted. I suggest you retain independent counsel immediately. The SEC will have questions and you'll want to distance yourselves from what's coming. The room erupted into chaos. Board members demanded explanations. Jessica tried desperately to access accounts on her phone. Mark just sat there, staring at me like he'd never seen me before. The security guard touched my arm. Ma'am, I still need you to leave. I stood, gathering my things with shaking hands. Of course. I wouldn't want to be here when the FBI arrives anyway. As I walked out, David finally met my eyes. The smallest nod passed between us. He'd make sure the company survived what was coming. In the lobby, Emily waited with the reporter, both watching me expectantly. Behind me, raised voices spilled from the boardroom. My phone buzzed with messages from lawyers, federal agents, journalists. I'd won. I'd destroyed them both. So why did victory taste like ashes in my mouth? Ready? Emily asked softly. I wasn't. I never would be. But I nodded anyway and stepped into the morning light, leaving behind the wreckage of 2 decades of trust and love and lies. 3 days after the board meeting, I sat in Emily's living room watching Mark's arrest on live television. FBI agents led him out of Innovatech in handcuffs while reporters shouted questions about fraud and embezzlement. My phone buzzed. Jessica, we need to talk. Now. I found her waiting in the park where I'd met Lucas, her designer outfit replaced by jeans and a plain sweater. She looked younger, almost vulnerable. Congratulations, she said flatly. You've destroyed everything. You did that yourself. Did I? She turned, eyes blazing. You really think you're the hero here? The wronged wife getting justice? Is there another word for what you did? Growth, ambition, evolution. She stepped closer. Mark was suffocating in the company you helped build. All those careful policies, those traditional approaches. You were holding Innovatech back. Holding him back. My laugh sounded hollow. Is that how you justified stealing millions? We were revolutionizing. You were embezzling funds through shell companies and destroying evidence. Save the corporate buzzwords for your legal defense. She pulled out her phone. Speaking of evidence, she played a recording, my voice from months ago, discussing confidential company information at a restaurant. Funny how things can be taken out of context. Go ahead, I said. Add witness intimidation to your charges. You don't get it, do you? Her composure cracked. I'm not going down alone. If I'm burning, everyone burns, including David. My blood froze. Leave him out of this. Why? He helped you set this up. His hands aren't clean either. She smiled, cruel and desperate. How do you think the board will react when they learn their new CEO was part of the conspiracy? What do you want? Recant your statement to the SEC. Say you manufactured evidence because you were jealous of Mark's relationship with me. Play the unstable wife they already think you are. Through the trees, I spotted Lucas watching us. He'd been right about Jessica all along. No, I said simply. Then You'll what? Release selective recordings? Try to frame David? I stepped closer. Go ahead, because I have something better. I pulled out my own phone, playing a video. Jessica in Mark's office the night before his arrest, frantically shredding documents and deleting files. Karen's quite good with surveillance cameras, I said quietly. And unlike your recordings, this footage is already with the FBI. Her face went pale. You're bluffing. Like you bluffed about those photos you had Lucas take? The ones you were going to doctor? I watched the realization hit her. He gave me everything, Jessica. Every conversation, every plan, every threat. He wouldn't. He did. Because unlike you, some people still have a conscience. She lunged for my phone. I stepped back, letting her momentum carry her forward until she stumbled. It's over, I said. The FBI has everything. The SEC has frozen all the accounts. Even if you run now, there's nowhere to hide. You self-righteous bitch. She straightened, mask finally falling away completely. You think this makes you better than me? You destroyed your own marriage out of spite. No, I corrected her. I destroyed it for justice. The difference matters. Police cars appeared at both park entrances. Jessica saw them too, her expression shifting from anger to fear. One last thing, I said as officers approached. Those traditional policies you hated? They're why Innovatech survived 20 years before you showed up. Remember that in prison? They led her away, reading her rights. Lucas watched from the trees, relief visible on his face. My phone buzzed with a message from David. Board meeting tomorrow. Time to rebuild. Emily appeared beside me. You okay? I watched Jessica's figure disappear into a police car, thinking of Mark's face on the news, of 28 years reduced to criminal charges and betrayal. No, I admitted, but I will be. Was it worth it? I thought of the company we'd built, the trust we'd shared, the love I'd thought would last forever. All of it shattered now, but in its place something else had grown, something harder, clearer, more honest. Ask me tomorrow, I said, turning away from the police cars. Right now I need a drink. Emily linked her arm through mine. I know just the place. Behind us, sirens wailed into the distance, carrying away the last pieces of my old life. Ahead lay something new, uncertain but mine alone. The divorce papers sat unsigned on Emily's coffee table while CNN played footage of Mark's perp walk for the 100th time. My phone buzzed with a message from David. Board meeting in an hour. You coming? I hadn't been back to Innovatech since that day. Part of me wanted to leave it all behind, start fresh somewhere else. But that would mean letting them win in a different way. The office felt smaller somehow. Karen met me in the lobby, her familiar efficiency unchanged. They're waiting in the main conference room. And Rachel... She hesitated. There's a letter. From Mark. I slipped it into my pocket unopened. The boardroom fell silent as I entered. David stood at the head of the table, looking more comfortable there than Mark ever had. As I was saying, he continued, we need to rebuild trust. both internally and with our clients. He nodded to me, which is why I'm proposing Rachel take over as Chief Operating Officer. Murmurs rippled through the room, not all of them positive. The same Rachel who saved this company from fraud, David interrupted. Who protected our clients' interests? Yes, that Rachel. I studied the faces around the table. Some wouldn't meet my eyes. Others looked calculating, measuring this new reality against their ambitions. I'll need time to consider the offer, I said. David nodded, unsurprised. Take all the time you need. We're not going anywhere. Afterward, I found myself in my old office. Everything was exactly as I'd left it, down to the water stain on my desk from that morning I discovered the texts. Lucas appeared in the doorway. I'm leaving Innovatech, he said without preamble. Got a job offer in Seattle. Running away? Learning from mistakes. He shifted uncomfortably. Jessica called me from jail, wanted me to testify that you set her up. And? I told her the truth would come out either way. He managed a small smile. Good luck, Rachel. Try not to destroy any more companies. After he left, I finally opened Mark's letter. His handwriting was shaky, prison paper cheap and thin. I never meant for any of this to happen, it began. I crumpled it without reading further. Some explanations came too late. Emily found me still sitting there at sunset. David called, said you haven't given him an answer. I don't know if I can walk these halls every day, I admitted. Everything here reminds me of what you lost or what you gained. I thought about that first day in the garage, dreaming up Innovatech with Mark, how young we'd been, how full of hope. Then I thought about Jessica's face when justice finally caught up with her, about Mark's betrayal, about the strength I'd found in the wreckage. Both, I said finally. Then maybe that's your answer. Emily perched on my desk. You can't erase the past, but you can build something new on top of it. My phone buzzed. A news alert. Jessica had taken a plea deal, agreeing to testify against Mark. The final piece falling into place. I pulled out the divorce papers, signing my name with steady hands. The movement knocked over a frame on my desk, an old photo of Mark and me at Innovatech's opening. The glass cracked, creating a web of fractures across our smiling faces. Perfect metaphor? Emily asked. Perfect ending. I stood, gathering my things. Tell David I'll take the job, but I want Lucas's old office. Not this one? No. I looked around the space one last time. This room belongs to someone I used to be. Time to let her go. We walked out together, past Karen's knowing smile, past the boardroom where power had shifted like tectonic plates, past all the memories of love and betrayal and revenge. In the lobby, the security guard held the door. Good night, Mrs. He stopped, uncertain. Just Rachel, I said, stepping into the evening air. That's all I need to be now. Emily linked her arm through mine. Dinner? Actually, I said, I think I'll walk for a while. I want to remember this feeling. What feeling? I looked back at the building where I'd lost everything and found myself. Freedom. The sun set behind Innovatech's glass towers, casting long shadows across the city. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new battles, new choices. But tonight, in this moment between ending and beginning, I finally felt whole.